Welcome to Daily Brief this week. 5 days of remodeling industry intelligence distilled into what actually matters for your production schedule, your design conversations, and your margins. Here's what you need to know heading into next week.
6 days from now, the cost of a Canadian door or cabinet box goes up 50% overnight, with no exemption for anything USMCA already covers. That deadline is the sharpest edge on a week that underneath it was really about one thing. This industry isn't slowing down, it's splitting apart. By project size, by geography, and now by which side of the tariff line your materials fall. Welcome to the weekly residential remodeling brief, a review of what mattered most this week for production, design, and business leaders across the United States and Canada. 7 days, 5 developments, one pattern connecting them. Let's get into it. This week's overall signal. Now, from a distance, the headline data looks stable. Inflation landed where forecasters expected. Canada's permits rebounded hard. NAHB's confidence index has held above 60 for a year, but every number hides a divide underneath. Financing is still a coin flip heading into September. Construction employment keeps sliding even as the broader economy adds jobs, and spending that looked healthy in the aggregate is concentrating in 3 states and in smaller projects, while everything else softens. This wasn't a week of new risk. It was a week where the risk that's been building all year got a lot more specific. Number 1, trade policy whiplash. What happened? A 50% tariff on Canadian panels, doors, moldings, cabinets, and cement takes effect August 19th, under a provision never before used to impose tariffs. At the same time, Commerce is on track to cut the Canadian softwood lumber duty by roughly 10 points in a separate, unrelated action. So what changed this week? The shipping exemption for goods already in transit closed. The question for suppliers is no longer what's on a boat. It's what's already sitting in a U.S. warehouse. This matters because framing gets cheaper the same 2 weeks the finished package gets more expensive. The opposite of the pattern this industry had planned around for about 2 years. Production. Confirm this week what Canadian origin panel, door, and millwork stock is landed versus still moving, and lock framing lumber before the softwood adjustment lands. Design on anything not yet specified. Choose a non-Canadian line now rather than betting on how customs classifies it later. Business owners, pull signed, unstarted contracts with a fall install date and a Canadian finished package and decide this week whether your escalation clause gets invoked. The leadership response. Name one person who owns tariff exposure tracking through September. Number 2, the Fed's coin flip week. Well, what happened? A weak July jobs report cut the odds of a September hike. Then Cleveland Fed President Beth Hammack said Monday that one hike probably isn't enough. Then yesterday's inflation report landed exactly on forecast, and the market settled back to roughly 40%. What changed this week? The argument moved 3 times in 5 days and ended almost back where it started, which tells you September is genuinely undecided, not a formality either direction. Now, why it matters. A meaningful share of remodeling work is financed through home equity lines, which move with the Fed, not the 30-year mortgage rate everyone talks about. Production. Minimal directly, though a rate move affects how many signed jobs proceed on schedule. Design. On equity finance projects, build the scope conversation around what the client would cut if the payment rose. Business owner, stress test your 4th quarter pipeline against both a hold and a hike, because right now either is live. The leadership response. Ask equity finance clients whether they've locked their rate and prioritize follow-up on the answer. Future markets, as reported by Bloomberg, are pricing the September decision as close to even money. Number 3, construction's quiet side. What happened? Residential construction employment fell year over year for a 17th straight month, even as the broader economy adds jobs and small business hiring plans hit a 4-year high. What changed this week? The divergence widened. NFIB's optimism index hit its highest level in a year, but that strength is broad economy, not residential construction specifically. Why it matters? The labor headlines you read this week aren't describing your trade base. Overall hiring strength can coexist with your subs getting harder to book. Production, reconfirm in writing key subcontractors for October and November. Design, build extra schedule buffer into specifications heavy projects with a false start. And the business owner, wage growth cooled to 3.2%. Real relief if your estimates reflect it. The leadership response, pull 10 open estimates written before June and check whether the labor line still matches what you're paying crews today. Number 4, the market splits by project size. What happened here? 3 surveys this week. Howe's, NAHB's Remodeling Market Index, and a Pro Remodeler mid-year synthesis all showed the same pattern. Small and moderate projects run strong, in the low 70s on a 100-point scale, while large projects sit in the mid-60s with shortening backlogs. What changed this week? This had been building for months, but 3 independent sources converging in the same 7 days confirms it's a structural, not a one survey fluke. Why it matters? Well, if your business depends on a small number of very large jobs, you're fighting the softest part of the market. Production. A shorter, large project backlog leaves less room to absorb a delayed material or sub falling through. Design, the moderate project, $20,000 to $50,000, is the healthiest band and probably deserves its own process, not a scaled down large project workflow. Business owner, check your own revenue by size band before assuming the national trend applies either way. The leadership response, decide deliberately what share of next year's pipeline you want in each band. Howe's Pro's Industry Barometer and NAHB's Remodeling Market Index both point the same direction this quarter. Number 5, growth concentrates by geography. What happened? The NAHB research this week shows California, Texas, and Florida alone account for nearly 21% of national remodeling activity, while states posting negative growth doubled from 5 to 10 in a single quarter. Canada's June permits, meanwhile, rebounded far more than expected, and an earlier census revision flipped U.S. remodeling spending negative year over year after months of being reported as growing. So what changed this week? The state level detail is new, and it shows a national growth number and a shrinking number can both be true depending on where you're standing. This matters because your local market and the national headline may be describing 2 different realities this year. For production and design, minimal impact directly, though regional pricing should be benchmarked locally. And as a business owner, if you're in a state NAHB shows contracting, don't benchmark against the national story. If you're in a growth state, ask why and lean into it. The leadership response here is to reconcile your own year-over-year revenue against your specific state's trend, not the national one. What connects this week's stories? Now, all 5 stories are really the same thing from a different direction. Predictability got harder to buy this week, right when the industry needs it most. Costs move in 2 directions at once. Financing is a toss-up, labor is tightening in ways the broader economy doesn't show, and growth itself, by project and by place, is concentrating rather than spreading out. That doesn't mean the outlook is bad. It means the margin for guessing got smaller, and the firms that do well this fall will be instrumenting their own numbers rather than trusting the national narrative in either direction to describe their market. 3 role-based takeaways. For production teams, the most important question is what you can confirm in writing about material origin and subcontractor availability before August 19th. Assumptions are the expensive option right now. For design teams, the moderate-sized project is the healthiest part of this market. If your process still treats it as a smaller, large project, this is the week to build its own lane. And for business owners, you're operating with more real uncertainty on cost and financing than at any point this year. The response isn't to freeze, it's to build your own numbers by size, by state, by supplier. So you're deciding from evidence rather than the headline. Now, what to watch next week? Watch for the CBP's implementing guidance on the Section 338 tariff before it takes effect on August 19th. Watch Commerce's final determination on the softwood lumber duty cut expected in late August. Watch today's producer price index and tomorrow's retail sales report, the last inputs before the Fed's September 15th and 16th meeting. And watch whether NAHB's next remodeling market index shows the large versus small gap project still wisening. Now, closing leadership question. If the next 6 weeks brings the tariff, the Fed decision, and the state level divergence exactly as the week described them, does your fourth quarter plan still hold? Or is it quietly built on the national headline instead of your home numbers? Thank you once again for listening to the weekly residential remodeling brief. If you have any questions about Remodeler's Advantage or anything we do, please email me, greg@remodelersadvantage.com.
That's Daily Brief this week. Catch the daily updates all week long on Substack. And we'll see you back here next Friday.